Will Utah commit to the Pac-12 by the end of the month? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of things relating to Utah and their Pac-12 media rights deal. But first, I want to talk to you guys about the sponsor of this episode in FanDuel. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, an official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We're going to close out the show by talking about a little bit about the 2018 that was recently named to the Hall of Fame. Also talk a little bit about a talented tight end. The Utah football team they've been adding a lot of tight ends too, added last week, but when you used to have the best tight end in college football last year, or who I would argue was, and Brant Kuithe, I'm getting ahead of myself because Brant Kuithe is going to be the best tight end in college football this year, right? Brock Bowers is going to do special things, but of course, Dalton Kincaid from last year. But either way, that's coming up in the second segment. But first, we got to start with the latest around the Pac-12 media rights deal, which has been the driving focus and just in general the storyline of the offseason, basically. And we could be getting a resolution to this ongoing story and saga that has really been a huge part of everything since I think really March. Maybe we could even go back to February, but ever since the Big 12 agreed to their media rights deal, all eyes turned to the Pac-12. And now we sit here. But what is the latest on it? Well, we got some insight from a few different reporters. First, let's start with the Athletics' Stuart Mandel, who reported that Washington State's president, Kirk Schultz, stated at a Board of Rights meeting. Remember, this is all from what Mandel reported in The Athletic. This all comes from his piece, what I'm about to say. Stated at a Board of Regents meeting that he expects the Pac-12 to have a media rights deal done by the end of the month. And, we'll dive into some of the other stuff in a moment because there is a lot more noteworthy stuff in the reporting. But let's just start there. That would be really great, honestly, in my opinion, because I am getting, as you guys know, we've been talking about this a lot lately because it is very important because this media rights deal hinges on where Utah will be playing their games in the future. So this is a huge story, but one that we've just continued to cover and continue to cover and continue to cover. I feel like ESPN covering Dak Prescott or Lamar Jackson's contracts, basically, because we just keep talking about the same thing. But the truth is, it's the most important thing. Just like those contracts for those players, those quarterbacks were the most important things for those franchise. This is the most important thing for Utah and all of the Pac-12 members is the completion of this deal. They want to stay together or they'll be playing their games against a total new set of opponents come in the short-term future. So it said they expected that to be done by the end of the month. To me, I can definitely see that happening. And it even said later on, this was also a thing in Mandel's thing that he said, the Wazoo president said he's at a 7 out of 10 is what he told the Board of Regents in terms of confidence the deal gets done. So that's over 5, so over 50%, we'll say. So that's something too. But he still said he expected it to be done. And 70%, you can still feel confident in things if you're at 70% in it. You're not complete confidence in it, but it still means you have some form of belief in it, right? So I would have loved that be a little bit higher maybe before I'm full on like, yes, this is happening. But that at least is a little encouraging to me, although we have heard this before, right? We've heard, oh, the deal will get done this month. Oh, the deal will get done next month or this month, tomorrow, next week, it's happening. Like we've just heard a lot of different reports and things and rumors and all of that nature and kind of sort out there. So this is one of those things I'll believe it when I see it, but I do believe it makes a lot of sense that this could get done because the grant of rights has been finalized. For those of you who are wondering what that is, well, Jake Hatch actually screenshotted a shot from John Canzano. I apologize for mispronouncing him. He does great work at his own site and then on the radio. But this is a quote from his piece. He said the remaining Pac-12 members have finalized the terms for their grant of rights, and that contract includes a variety of elements that all 10 schools need to agree on, and it appears they haven't. Once again, it's a direct quote from Canzano's piece. Among the other items, the grant of rights includes what sponsorships are Pac-12 centralized versus what the individual campuses can sell, what set of rights the conference can sell, and how the revenue will be split among the 10 programs. So that means they have agreed to all those things there. And like I said, the revenue share percentage-wise, I don't know if they have the exact money and all of that stuff figured out, but to continue back to Stuart Mandel's pieces, because we have a lot of like the main like college football reporters, especially on the West Coast, putting in a lot of work to bring us the coverage on these storylines. But he said what he had projected, this is once again comes from Mandel's story, quoting what President Schultz of Washington State said. He said he's seen the projections and he doesn't believe the dollar figure will be that much larger than what they've seen, which we never really thought it was going to be a lot larger or larger in general. So even hearing like, oh, it won't be a lot larger, it's like, oh, well, maybe it could be a little larger. Like that is something. And then the other thing too is he said it shouldn't be a lot small. He just said shouldn't be smaller than what was in the past. So it will probably be a fairly flat, basically like amount like they expected. And if we're going like fairly flat in terms of like what's expected, let's look back at 2022, in which the Pac-12 had a 385.6 million in revenue, which is an average of 32.1 per school. So, I mean, that would be great, right? If the Pac-12's media deal came in at 32.1, I mean, I was on my show last week saying like, if I was Utah, the lowest I would expect was 22, but that just once again shows you how crazy like all the rumors and everything going on around this is. Like it's just hard to tell who to trust and who to believe. And I tend to believe the Stuart Manzels and the Canzanos, who have consistently broken stories, come in with really strong reporting, than a lot of these other reporters who have, I'm not saying they haven't done good work, they just haven't broken as many stories. It's the same thing as the NBA. When Woj and Shams break it, that's when you're like, okay, this is really happening. You give respect to all the other guys too, but you're waiting for Woj and Shams. That's when it's officially happening. Guys like Mandel, Pete Thamel, Gonzano, those are the guys I view in the same category, kind of like that, the Woj and Shams of the Pac-12, of this media rights deal. Basically, when they say it's officially happening, that's when I'll be like, those are the numbers, everything we believe there. Everything else before that is just going to be reacting to rumors and everything to me, because we've heard multiple people come out and say the Pac-12 media rights deal will be done this week. So-and-so school is going to be leaving for this conference this week. So that's where, to me, it's just a bunch of, it's messy. It's a messy situation, as we said, but I think these quotes are really encouraging. We've heard multiple presidents now in the last couple of weeks come out and say it. And I think once again, having that grant of rights agreement done is huge. I mean, that is massive to get all the conferences in agreement on it, to feel like you're in a good place for it. Now you're just waiting on the final dollar amount. And it's going to be very interesting to see what it comes in at, right? And it's also interesting to see, like, where we've heard the rumors that it's ESPN, and then obviously the streaming partners are kind of the ones interested in the games. ESPN wants the late night package. Where are those midday Pac-12 games going to be played? Are they going to Amazon? Is someone else going to swoop in last minute and enter this, like a CBS or a Fox? Although last we saw reported those companies exited talks. So that's where this is really interesting to me. There's a lot up in the air with this still, but there's also a lot of positive steps toward its resolution. And I hope this can get done in June. I think it could. And if it will, then if this is done, like, and they can get in a number that is relatively close to like that, even like remotely close to that 32 million, there is not a doubt in my mind that Utah stay in the Pac-12. I said last week, I even think like 5 to 6 million less, Utah would still stay in the Pac-12, just because of the familiarity, the opportunity to still like build a brand and everything. It's just hard for relocating. You might have to do it in the short term again. So even off that, I said Utah would probably stay, but I feel even stronger if it's the same amount, or potentially even more, which is what it could be if they could get, they said slightly larger. If they're at 34, I believe that would be more than at least what the Big 12 is doing immediately in their conference right agreement deal. So a lot of crazy news coming on, but some great reporting by Stuart Mandel, Gonzano as well. And it's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out. But another Pac-12 president speaks that's getting closer to getting done, and gives us a little hint at the dollar amount, which is something we hadn't heard almost anyone really allude to yet. So it's exciting that the Pac-12 could get into the $30 million range, when there were some people, I've seen some people in the comments say as low as 15, which we knew that wasn't going to happen. But I definitely thought in the 20s, and it still could very well end up in the 20s, right? That's where we said there's a lot of stuff that's thrown out there, but this is a very encouraging step for Utah, for the Pac-12. And hopefully he's right. And hopefully this all comes to a resolution at the end of the month, and we can get back to talking about what we all love, is with a product on the field, which this obviously still has a huge impact on. But I'm definitely excited when we can get back to talking about football and season previews and all kind of stuff like that. But we'll have to wait on that a little bit until this is done, because this is everything right now as it relates to the Pac-12 and Utah, especially the future of where Utah will be playing their games. So it's going to be interesting to see. And speaking of the future where Utah will be playing their games, Utah added another elite tight end and a 3-star prospect, and we're going to tell you all about him in a moment. But first, got to tell you a little bit more about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel is great, guys. You can get great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and you get paid in your winnings instantly. And when they say make a fast break to the playoffs, that's like Magic Johnson Showtime fast break over there, because guys, the NBA playoffs, more than likely, at least I'll say, I think they're coming to an end tonight. You guys listening to this Monday, I would be surprised if by the time you're listening to my Tuesday show, the NBA is still going on. I think Denver has looked like the best team. I look at the way the role players are stepping up for them versus the Heat. It's just seem like they've run out of gas, right? I think Jokic is going to end up winning finals MVP, but Jamal Murray still got a shot at it with all these 10 assist games he's been having somehow, which always amazes me. He gets his 10 assists, I will say, but a lot of credit to him. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can battle on. And hey, I'm sure the odds are great for the Heat right now. If you want to head over and check them out on FanDuel if you think they're going to shock the world, something they've done in each of the previous 3 rounds so far. Who's to say they couldn't do it again? But make sure you guys head over to FanDuel, get in on all the NBA playoff action, especially the NBA Finals action right now. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Alrighty. Moving back to Utah football, things related. Let's talk about now the newest Ute who's going to be joining the team, and that is Ryan Boltwood, the 6'4", 195-pound, 3-star tight end who's going to be joining this program. He committed on, I believe it was Friday. I just pulled up June 1st. So that would have been last Thursday, and we just didn't get a chance to talk about it because we talked about another tight end the team added. Look, Utah is becoming tight end U a little bit, right? With Dalton Kincaid now, Brant Keithy, Thomas Yasmin should have an NFL future. There's a lot of guys here that I think are going to, Utah is going to continue to be a tight end factory, and I think that's not going to change with the addition of the guys like Landon King and everything. So Boltwood is a little bit more of a long-term projection, a late commit, obviously, but still a 3-star guy and who's from California too. Anytime, as we've talked about before, you get a guy from California, Texas, or Florida, that just instantly excites me because I have no questions about can they play against good competition. They played against great competition going against the 3 best high school footballs, if they played against in those 3 top high school football states overall. So what will Boltwood bring to the team? He's a guy who can line up all over the field to me, can play on the line, off the line, slot, a little bit out. He played outside too. It would take a little bit of time for him to get to the outside, I think, at the college level, but still showed the potential to do it. Got really good speed and acceleration, tough to tackle, pretty good route runner too, does a really good job selling those short routes before going deep. So it's a true 3-level threat. Can be a guy over the middle of the field, tough to tackle, good body control as well, can shake off some of those tackles and keep his feet moving after securing a catch. Does a good job tiptoeing the sideline to stay in bounds. Also does a really good job tracking the ball. He's got really long arms, so a nice catch radius too. Can make adjustments on the ball, back shoulder throws, falling down, securing catches, we're getting blasted, as I mentioned. He can do all of that, and I really like the speed. That's probably the #1 thing I like with Boltwood. I mean, he's a legit track speed. You can head over to his Twitter and see he posted a bunch of his track times on there. So this is a guy who's running track, and then once again, California, one of the top, I say high school football, California is just one of the top athletic states, obviously, in general. So anytime you can put up track numbers in California, that's going to impress me still. So that's where Boltwood is just a special kind of athlete, and I think could develop into an elite tight end. But it is going to take some time. I will say before we dive into the projections, I do want to say I think he's a physical blocker. I think he does a good job keeping his hands inside. He's got good leg drive, works well with his teammates. So I do see the potential there. But the #1 thing with him is he's got to get bigger and stronger, right? This is a guy who is going to take 2 to 3 years before we hear him if he was able to compete for a spot on this Utah team, right? And it's a loaded tight end room. And you see guys transfer. So that's once again, too, where what's going to happen with Boltwood. That's where it's kind of up in the air. But I think he's definitely got the potential to be a player for this team. As I said, really got to get bigger, got to get stronger. But he's an under the radar guy. And why are those under the radar guys important when we're talking about Utah football? Because that's how they built themselves into the powerhouse that has become back-to-back Pac-12 championships. You think about the Devin Lloyds, the Brant Keithys, both those were 2-stars, and they grew and kind of molded and matured into elite football players who are amongst the best players at their position by the time they're ready to leave school, or as Brant Keithy's going to be at the end of this year, ready to leave school. So there's so many guys under the radar that allowed Utah to beat those teams like the USCs, the Washingtons, the Oregons, who were getting the higher recruiting classes. This is how Utah was able to beat the other teams, is they were getting the under the radar recruits. They were able to bring these guys in, develop them, help them reach their full potential. And then they're the ones who are going out there on Saturdays and making plays for this group because everyone else overlooked them, counted them out. But this Coach Witt and his staff have done such a good job identifying fits for their program based on potential, based on character, based on work ethic, all those things that they consider and that they see in these guys when they bring them in. These projections have worked great for them. It's led to another number of guys booming too. And I said with Boltwood, like I said, it could be a couple of years, right? Like you never know. I don't think anyone expected Brant Keithy to be as productive as he was as early on in his Utah career. And now he's one of the best tight ends to ever come through the program, should lead the team in receiving yards this year. And what a great guy for a guy like Boltwood to sit back and learn from, right? To watch how he works, to watch how he approaches the game. Look, all these guys want to make their own path, but I'm sure Boltwood, his goal in committing to Utah is to be a dominant tight end here, to work with Fred Whittingham Jr., one of the best tight end coaches in the country. I would go the best for my money, but either way, just a great opportunity for Boltwood. I really like the athleticism. I think it's there for him to grow into and mold into and just be a special player overall, mentioned kind of the 3-star as well. So one of those kind of late under the radar guys, but could make the difference. Is we've seen so many under the radar guys make a difference for this Utah football team. And it's going to be fun to see the under the radar guys that pop up this season, right? Sione Vaki maybe wasn't at like as under the radar as some of these other guys we're talking about, but still a guy like, and when you're talking about how they would produce last season, I didn't see a lot of people talking about Sione Vaki early on in the year, and I'll include myself in that for sure. If there were other people who were, props to you guys. I just know I wasn't. And then he kind of molded into and grew into a role over the course of the season and really stepped up. I think about Junior Tafuna and Van Fillinger back in the 2021 Pac-12 championship run. Bam Olaseni coming on strong late, right? So once again, just so many guys, and these can be the kind of pickups, just the ones that get overlooked because they're not a national signing day, they're not in everything else, where you kind of forget about him and you're like, oh, like he's on the program. Like, well, we could look back and be like, wow, because Boltwood to me does have the potential to be an elite difference maker for this Utah team, just because of that speed, the route running, the body control, as I mentioned. This is an elite athlete with long arms too. Just got to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, adjust to the college game. And I think he can be something. I really like Boltwood, and I love that this team continues to prioritize and load up on the tight ends. You want to become more explosive and utilize your receivers a little bit more, but you also don't want to compromise how game-changing your tight ends are doing. That's what Andy Ludwig knows, and that's what this offense is going to want to and try to continue to do. So really excited about the addition of Boltwood. I think he can definitely make a difference in probably 2 to 3 years. I'll go with. I don't expect him to do anything this year, really, obviously, just because how loaded that tight end room is with Thomas Yasmin, Brett Keithy, Landon King, and whoever, Miki Sukacharaga filling the blocking role. So it's a loaded tight end room right now, but keep an eye on Boltwood for the long term. I do believe this is a guy who can be something. So going to be interesting to see how his Utah career pans out. So we go from talking about a guy who's going to be hopefully the future of the Utah football program and at the tight end position potentially, to let's talk about the past and one of the best parts of Utah football history in the 2008 Utah football team, who was officially announced to the Hall of Fame. They defeated 4 top 25 teams back then, including number 4 Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, as we know. They would go on to earn the number 2 ranking by the Associated Press in 2008. This all comes to us courtesy of our friends at the Utah Athletic Department, who posted this to their website. They earned a top 25 ranking after beating Michigan in the season opener. Over the course of the season, they would beat TCU, who was ranked 11th at the time. They beat BYU in Salt Lake to claim the Mountain West title, and they raced out to a 21-0 lead in the Sugar Bowl against the Crimson Tide at the time, and it was a 31, and then ended up going on to win 31-17 too. So Kyle Whittingham was recognized as National Coach of the Year by the AFCA and the Paul Bear Bryant Award Committee to know about how many special defensive players this team had. And of course, Brian Johnson, the All Mountain West Conference first team quarterback, leading the charge. But it's just so special to look back on some of these teams like this, right? And like remember like just how great they are, especially like just to think about like beating Alabama. Like we know how hard that is, not easy to do. And I for those of you who were in at Rice Eccles the day that Utah played USC, we saw Tennessee do it. It was one of the loud, that day was very loud, but that was the loudest I've heard the stadium probably get pregame before, like not outside of like right before kickoff, right? When everyone's roaring and all that, but like it was an hour before kickoff and they showed that Tennessee made the kick and everyone went absolutely nuts. Also, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the SEC is like starting to fine people for storming fields. And I know that was something me and Mark Colkin of Locked On USC, or Locked On Trojans, excuse me. Actually, I think he is just Locked On USC. Either way, had a debate about like, I love storming the field. I think it's great. It's memories. And I see so many athletic departments and things who will fine like schools for storming the field. And then these same people who make these kind of rules, or I mean, look, maybe not the ones that make the rules, but how many schools do you go to where you walk in and you see like pictures of like how great an atmosphere that was? And like, you will even see pictures sometimes like of how cool the atmosphere was because you have all the fans on the field. So look, I understand doing like a little slap on the wrist fine just because you don't want after every single win, people storming the field. But anytime you get a top 10 win, anything like that remotely, a huge upset, if you're a smaller program, you should absolutely be able to storm the field. So I'll get off my college football soapbox after that, because like I said, thankfully it's not a Pac-12 rule. I'm sure the Pac-12 has some fine for it, but those were some of the best atmospheres last season. The USC game, as well as the Oregon game was incredible too. Those would probably be the two I go with off the top of my head for rushing the field in the past 2 years. But there's just so many fun atmospheres and memories that come with that stuff. But either way, just looking back on it though, like think about the position that Michigan football's in, that Alabama football's in, that TCU was in last year. And there was a year where Utah beat all those programs. So that's just really special stuff. And it's crazy too, look back and think like going into the big house up at Michigan and getting a 25 the 23 win. That was one where Johnson threw for 305 yards too, by the way. My goodness. So just special kind of stuff and performances too. And you look at stuff like beating Oregon State back then. We already mentioned the TCU victory too. That was a low scoring one. That was only 13-10. We talked about how many special players were on this Utah defense. They gut out a win. And then how about just taking it to BYU 48-24 in that game? That was Johnson at 300 yards passing. Johnson had over 180 yards passing in every game on the season except for one, and that was in a 40-7 win against Wyoming. So they obviously really didn't need him that day, but team was undefeated that season, one of the rare undefeated seasons in program history too. And then we mentioned again just that win against Alabama too in the Sugar Bowl. All the eyes on this Utah football program that came in undefeated, right? Sure, they won at Michigan, they beat TCU, and they defeated BYU, who BYU and TCU were both top 15 ranked teams, but Alabama's a whole nother level, right? And what did Coach Witt and Brian Johnson and the rest of that team do? They rose up to the occasion and blasted the Crimson Tide, earning probably the win in Utah football program history. Look, I could be shortchanging someone, but at least I know, and I know I'm a little on the younger side, right? But like when I think of Utah football wins, like I think that's the one that everyone stands out to on that big of a stage and that big of a moment. To be able to secure that kind of a victory is just something you don't forget, and it truly is one of the early steps to show us, like, not early because Kyle Whittingham had done some other really strong things, but just another thing to be like, wow, Kyle Whittingham is putting together a resume to be the greatest coach in Utah football history. Some of you may say one of, I would say the greatest coach. I understand, and that could be a little recency bias because I am on the younger side, as I mentioned, but I don't think that's that crazy to say once again. So really cool opportunity for this 2018. They absolutely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame for that incredible season. It's going to be really cool to see them get honored sometime in the fall. I forget exactly when it is, but they will get honored with the rest of the Hall of Fame, who will continue to break down in the coming weeks on Locked On Utes. And that is going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. But stay with us stay with us this week, because tomorrow I'm going to have Spencer McLaughlin of the Locked On Pac-12 podcast on, and we're going to talk about if it's actually realistic for the Pac-12 to beat the Big 12's media rights deal number. Make sure you guys join us then tomorrow, as Spencer will be joining me. But that is going to do it for our show today. So we appreciate you guys for listening as always. Have a fantastic Monday, and we'll see you tomorrow on Locked On Utes.